Tonight, President Trump calls it quits. The president announcing today that the U.S. is going against its allies and pulling out of the Iranian nuclear deal. Trump going it alone and imposing new sanctions on the Iranian regime. Here are his words.
The fact is, this was a horrible, one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made. Today, we have definitive proof that this Iranian promise was a lie. Last week, Israel published intelligence documents, long concealed by Iran, conclusively showing the Iranian regime and its history of pursuing nuclear weapons.
Already tonight, Iran, in response, warning it's ready to start nuclear enrichment, quote, without limitations. President Obama, whose signature foreign policy achievement was the Iran deal, is calling the president's move, quote, so misguided. And out front tonight, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, the man in charge of U.S. sanctions, which, of course, are now, back up and running. Secretary, thank you so much for your time tonight. We just heard the president there say Iran is lying. What exactly did Iran do, Secretary, to break the deal?
Well, let me be clear. President Trump has been very consistent since the campaign and since he came into office that this deal was not a good deal. It didn't protect the American people. He didn't like the fact it didn't have a term. We want to make sure Iran never has nuclear weapons. They don't have them now. They don't have them in 10 years. They don't ever have them. And Iran continues to work on ballistic missiles, which can deliver nuclear weapons, and support state terrorism. So the president has been very clear. This is about protecting the American public and making sure we have a good deal.
So I'm just trying to understand. I know he's saying before the deal that he's saying they were dishonest. That's what the prime minister of Israel had said last week. But, your own colleagues, other members of the cabinet, the DNI chief Dan Coats, Secretary of State now, but at the time, CIA chief Mike Pompeo have said specifically when it comes to the deal itself, Iran was in compliance, not in violation. Here they are.
Is it the judgment of the intelligence community that Iran has thus far adhered to the deal's major provisions?
Yes, and the judgment is there has been no material breach of the agreement.
Do you have any evidence to dispute the IAEA assessment that Iran is in full compliance with the JCPOA?
Senator, with the information that I've been provided, I've seen no evidence that they are not in compliance today.
So what are the grounds? What is the issue here?
Well, again, they're just confirming that they were in compliance with a bad deal. We had limited ability to do inspections. We couldn't go to military bases. And even if we could, at the end of 10 years, Iran was going to have nuclear weapons. So this is not about whether they were in compliance or they wouldn't are in compliance. This is about keeping America safe. And whether it's North Korea or Iran, President Trump isn't willing to kick the can down the road to have other presidents deal with it. He's taking action now to make sure that we're safe. And if Iran wants to be part of the international community, they will commit never to have nuclear weapons, not create a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, and stop working on ballistic missiles, which they don't need.
Now, look, the deal's far from perfect. I think everybody has admitted that, even those who wrote it. They're saying, but what it does is give us more visibility than we could have, and it's the best deal they could have gotten. You point out, not all you can't go to military bases without announcing yourself, but there's no powerful sovereign country in the world that would allow anybody to do that, including our own. Do you really think you're going to be able to get that in the terms of a deal to allow inspectors to walk on to an Iranian military base whenever they want?
If Iran is sincere in not having nuclear weapons, they will let us inspect properly. But again, there's lots of issues here. I mean, Senator Schumer himself, I was just looking at his information in 2005, used all the same arguments as to why he voted against the deal. It was a bad deal in 2005. It's a bad deal today. And for those people who say we couldn't get a better deal, we don't believe it. So the answer is we're going to put the sanctions back in place. If Iran legitimately wants to become part of the international community, they will sit down with us and our allies and negotiate a legitimate deal that's fair and protects American people.
Okay, so the issue then is, of course, we're going ahead and putting sanctions back on. You're the guy in charge of that for the United States as the Treasury Secretary. Our allies, though, that you mentioned in Europe are not on board. They were very clear today. They said in a statement, together we emphasize our continuing commitment to the JCPOA. That was Germany. That was France. That was the United Kingdom. Now that you're reinstating these sanctions, I guess the best thing you can do is to punish other countries who do business with Iran, right? So the U.S. isn't doing business, but if you are, we're going to punish you. We're going to sanction your banks. Secretary Mnuchin, will you sanction banks that are based in the U.K. or Germany because they're doing business in Iran?
This isn't about punishing other countries. I think, as you know, we have primary sanctions and secondary sanctions. We've been very careful in putting these in place. We have certain things that there's 90 days to wind down.
Yes.
As it relates to the oil markets, which take longer to get supply, as we cut off Iran's oil, we have 180 days. So we're going to work with our allies to make sure that there's a careful transition. But the sanctions worked. And we've had very close discussions with our allies.
Right, Secretary? I mean, the UK and France and Germany, they were all on board, but they're not now. So
well,
is it the United States that's alone?
Again, they are on board with our objectives. So we've had very good discussions with them. They're on board with the issue of the term. They're on board with concerns about ballistic missiles. They're on board with the concerns about state terrorism. We have slightly different views as to how to execute that. But we're going to work very closely with our allies. We all have the common objective, which every American should have, and that's to make sure that our children and their children are safe. And that means no nuclear weapons in Iran now, none in 7 years, none in 20 years.
So, Secretary, I just want to make sure I get the bottom line. It sounds like what you're saying is they're telling you something very different in private than they're saying publicly. Publicly, they're saying they support the deal. They think Iran is compliant, and they're staying in it. You're saying privately they're telling you the opposite?
No, I don't want to say they're saying one thing privately. What they're saying is they wanted to support the deal and add on to the deal. And President Trump's been very clear and careful. He didn't do this when he just came into office. He was very clear 6 months ago. He was very clear 3 months ago. He gave us time to work with our allies. He said he'll give us time, but he was very clear. On behalf of keeping the American people safe, he wasn't going to stick with a bad deal and kick it down the road. And, you know, if Iran is serious, they will sit down and negotiate. We'll see how serious they are. And as it relates to our allies, we're going to work very closely with them. As I said, we all have the same objectives. Make sure they don't have nuclear weapons. Make sure they stop having ballistic missiles and state terrorism.
Secretary, I want to ask you about some more breaking news this hour. I don't know if you heard it at the top of our hour, but we are reporting tonight that the Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg was questioned about hundreds of thousands of dollars paid to Michael Cohen. And he was questioned about that when he arrived earlier this year in the United States by private jet, actually here in the New York area. First question to you, Treasury Secretary. If a payment or payments like this had been made, adding up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, would they have been flagged to the Treasury Department?
Well, let me say I got here early for your show, so I was watching that segment. Other than watching you, I was not aware of all this. And comments as regards to what information Treasury does have within the organization and what it doesn't, I can't comment on.
Could you give us a little bit more information, though, because I want to make it clear, you already had sanctioned Viktor Vekselberg, right? You sanctioned a group of Russians in April. Viktor Vekselberg was among them. My understanding is one of your reasons, in part, was election interference. Can you tell us any more about why this individual, this oligarch, Viktor Vekselberg, was on your list?
Well, as you know, Congress passed a law that, with overwhelming support, 98-2 in the Senate, on instructing us to work on a report on sanctions on oligarchs and Russian officials. We were very careful. We took our time. We used both classified information and open source information. I can't go through the specifics of this, but we were very careful. And again, as it relates to the oligarchs, we put some of the toughest sanctions on them. But let me just also comment that when it came to Rusal, we weren't trying to hurt the people of Rusal. We weren't trying to create problems in the aluminum market. And as long as the oligarchs got rid of their position, we're working to deal with these issues. So again, sanctions are very powerful tools, and we're careful how we use them.
So obviously, as we're reporting, and you're well aware, Secretary, that for the FBI to take a Russian citizen when they come in the United States, pull them aside for questioning is very significant. It's not something they just do. It's a big deal when it happens. At this time, are you at Treasury working with Bob Mueller at all on information about anything with Viktor Vekselberg or payments from Viktor Vekselberg?
I can't make any comments as it relates to our sanctions or anything else on the specifics, but let me just comment. Right now, we have President Trump focused on a summit with North Korea, and for the first time, we may get rid of nuclear weapons in North Korea. So this is momentous. We have Secretary Pompeo over there meeting today as we speak. We're negotiating trade with China. This morning, President Trump and President Xi had a very good conversation.
Yeah.
They talked about trade. They talked about North Korea. The president is taking strong actions with Iran. So whether it's North Korea or whether it's Iran, the president is taking strong actions to protect the American people. As it relates to this Russian stuff, let's let the stuff get on with and it not be a distraction from what are the really important issues that are affecting us right now.
One final question, Treasury Secretary, if I may. The bottom line here, are you aware at this time of any suspicious bank activity involving Michael Cohen himself specifically, and any Russian or Russian-owned entities?
I'm somewhat surprised that you would ask me to even comment on these things, since the actions that Treasury takes are completely confidential. So you shouldn't read into this anyway. If you ask me about any person, John Smith, anybody else, I wouldn't on national TV comment about specific investigations. That would be completely inappropriate in my position.
All right. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to answer our questions. Obviously, it's an important one. But I respect that you're saying it is classified. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin.
Thank you.